Decentralized trading is, I would say, one of the biggest teams within crypto and AI. And to me, it's also one of the most interesting areas where blockchains and crypto can actually make a difference.
Even though we've had that brief run-up in December 2024, I do not think that we have seen the dot-com bubble moment for AI as a whole.
They are creating something called agent rank. And so this is an algorithm that basically ranks these AI agents in terms of their capability.
It is going to look different to what we have seen in December last year, just because the modes that existed back then are all gone by now.
AI agents are actually able to coordinate with one another, even though they are built by different people and disparate. And that's where I see a very big component of the blockchain coming in, because the blockchain serves as a neutral coordination layer. AI agents are actually able to coordinate with one another, even though they are built by different people and disparate. And that's where I see a very big component of the blockchain coming in, because the blockchain serves as a neutral coordination layer.
Good morning and welcome back to another episode of the Odyssey podcast. Today we are joined by Tang Yan, who's running Chain of Thought, one of the leading voices in the crypto X AI sector, which has come up throughout Q4 of 2024 with a lot of AI agents emerging, especially on Base and in the Solana ecosystem. Tang, welcome to the show. Maybe do you want to start by giving a brief intro to yourself? How did you end up here?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Max, for having me, and excited to be here to chat about crypto and AI. Yeah, I can give a quick background. And interestingly, before I got into crypto full time, I actually spent a lot of time in the AI space. So back in 2015, was part of the founding team of a healthcare AI company, and that was really far before the days of ChatGPT. So we were dealing with very traditional machine learning, natural language processing techniques. We use that on very unstructured data like clinical notes. And we work with a lot of enterprises within the healthcare ecosystem. So these would be typically health insurers, pharma companies. We had one of the largest mental health databases in the world, and we use that to help improve psychiatric care, help pharma companies run their clinical trials in a better way, and that really brought me into the world of AI as well as startups and tech startups, and that was a very interesting 6 years of a roller coaster journey. But I left in 2020 to go full time into crypto, and basically I got crypto pilled. Was starting to read a lot about what was happening in the blockchain space. At that point in time, I felt that blockchain was going to transform every single industry in the world. It aligned a lot very closely to a lot of my philosophical beliefs as well, around bringing power back to the people and having something that is uncensorable. And I really believe in a lot of that. So I started reading a lot, looking a lot, listening to podcasts, and then I went full time. And while I was in crypto, I joined Delphi Digital, a early stage venture research and consulting firm. And I spent 2.5 years at Delphi. That was a really fun time. I ran one of our research teams that was more focused on the consumer side of things, like consumer applications, NFTs, gaming. Learned a lot from a bunch of very smart colleagues in the space, and still, to me, some of the smartest people that I still respect a lot, and had a lot of fun. We did both research work and consulting with startups as well. I left in the early part of last year, so that was 2024, because I saw that what was happening in the AI space was actually going exponential. Things were exploding. To me, this was obviously a new big trend that was happening. And I knew that I needed to spend as much time as possible to understand what was actually happening, learn as much as I could. And my idea back then was actually really to lay the foundations for a next venture in the space, potentially in healthcare AI as well, because suddenly there were a lot of things that we couldn't do in the past in my previous company, previous startup, that we could do now with these large language models that were there. So that's what I set out to do. But along the way, I really got distracted by what was happening in the crypto and AI space. And with BitTensor being the very first project and protocol that I spent quite a bit of time looking into. And, it's been almost 1.5 years, and I haven't gotten out of that rabbit hole ever since. So today,
brief
Yep.
deep dive into BitTensor, because that's a crypto XAI project that gets a lot of coverage. But I think if you're not in the crypto XAI niche, you barely have an idea what BitTensor is even about.
Yeah, for sure. So BitTensor is probably, I would say, like one of the most like crypto native AI protocols that's out there right now. It really started a couple of years ago, and it had a very fair launch of its token, which is a Tau token back then. So there was no VC funding. It was all just mined, right? And it has a release schedule that's quite similar to Bitcoin in terms of like multiple periods of halving and a maximum supply of 21 million. At the heart of what BitTensor is basically an incentive network. So basically, there are many different subnets that are building on top of BitTensor, and every single subnet has a very specific objective or goal. For example, one subnet might be doing like decentralized training of an AI model. Another subnet might be looking at property prices and trying to predict what property prices might be in the next couple of weeks. And then another subnet might be focused on like sports betting and trying to identify like high opportunities like within the space and generate alpha over there. And how it works is that there are these like token incentives that are out there, and there are these like performance criteria that are designed by the subnet owners. So it's almost a little bit like a game. So the miners, who are usually people who run these AI models and train these AI models, they try to create the best models that can actually solve the problem that the subnet is posing out there. And if they do well, they get rewarded with these token incentives. And what BitTensor has really shown is the power of incentives. And when you have a very well designed like incentive system, you can actually create very powerful outcomes. And some of these subnets that we're seeing on BitTensor actually have been able to like produce like results that are comparable, if not better, than some of their Web2 counterparts out there. So yeah, I think that's the heart of what it is. How I like to kind of like think of BitTensor as well is like a little bit of an index of AI startups. So I think today there are like over 100 like different subnets like building on BitTensor, and every one of them is almost like an AI startup on its own. So many of them will fail. They probably won't be successful, but they're going to be probably at least a small handful of these that will actually succeed, and that's what I'm kind of looking forward to.
Are there any specific ones of these subnets that have gained any traction yet, or where you see a clear path to product market fit? Because what I'm somewhat concerned of is that is similar to what I've also seen ever since the AI agent hype in the later months of 2024, is that similar to narratives like restaking that we've seen in Q1 and Q2 of 2024, there's a lot of technical sophistication. In theory, it is a good use case. There are avenues you can explore, new product, new niches you can explore, but it fails to meet any demand that the market actually has. Is that different with BitTensor and these subnets so far?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question because like I think it's a question that's on everybody's mind as well. So I would say that there's a very wide spectrum of like subnets are within BitTensor. They are all on different parts of their life cycle as a startup. Some of these subnets are very early. They're still trying to build their products. They have some kind of like capabilities, but they're trying to productize it and get to some form of like product market fit. But there are a number of subnets, especially if you look at the top like 3 to 5 subnets on BitTensor, a number of them are actually quite impressive in terms of their sort of like performance metrics. So for example, I think the one that everybody kind of like looks a lot towards BitTensor is a subnet called Shoots. I think it's Subnet 64. And basically, this is a decentralized like inference network. So it's a little bit like Open Router, but basically it uses like these incentives to incentivize miners, provide their GPUs and computing power to that. So I don't know what their current, I haven't seen the chart for a while, but they are probably doing like hundreds of millions of like tokens being processed on a sort of like daily basis or so. I think that's pretty impressive. And then there are some that are working towards like bigger goals. So for example, like Templar, which is Subnet 3, is a decentralized like training network. It's currently training an 8 billion parameter like large language model. And I think the idea here is really that if decentralized training is, I would say, one of the biggest teams like within like crypto and AI. And to me, it's also one of the most interesting areas where blockchains and crypto can actually make a difference. And if we can show that we are actually able to like train some of these like large language models outside of the big research labs, because today only a handful of organizations, the OpenAIs, Anthropics, Metas, XAIs of the world have the capabilities and the resources and the computing power to train these large models. And it makes us imagine like what happens if one day like these companies decide not to release these models out to people to kind of use, and what happens to that, right? So being able to like train these models in a decentralized way where everybody at home is able to contribute some of their computing power to train these models is a very powerful and sexy idea. And so like Subnet 3 is sort of like gearing towards that. There are a huge amount of like technical challenges to sort of overcome in order to get to that final vision, but we can kind of like see them like progressing. I think they started by training a 1.5, no, I think it was about 1.2 billion parameter model, which they completed a couple of weeks ago. And now they started on an 8 billion parameter model. And, in the coming months, they'll probably start to inch up towards a 40 billion, maybe 100 billion parameter model. And slowly as climb up the curve in terms of capabilities. So these are just like two of the ones that I think are pretty interesting, but there are many more out there. And it's a whole huge ecosystem that even I struggle to keep up with every day.
What would you say is the largest value proposition that either crypto and blockchain bring to AI, or that AI brings to crypto and blockchain? Because it's hard from an outsider's perspective to assess, okay, is this just sort of an internet capital markets play where crypto and its permissionless technology allows retail, allows small institutions, allows foreign investors to get exposure to AI applications and AI infrastructure projects at a very early stage, whereas in the public markets, kind of the only proxy bet on AI you can make right now is NVIDIA and a bunch of the Mac 7 companies who are dabbling in the AI space too? Or is it more coming from, okay, there's a inherent symbiosis between blockchain technology and AI where these are deeply intertwined and can actually improve one and the other?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question, and something that I think we've all been trying to figure out a lot within the space. I would say that there are a few things where I see there's a very good like natural synergy between like both like crypto and blockchains as well as like AI. So I think for one, firstly, I think there is that philosophical like I guess, an argument to this, right? So basically, if we want something that is censorship resistant, if we want to have AI and compute that is like decentralized, where it's not sort of like tied down to a single point of failure, I think like these decentralized networks are one way to kind of like go about doing this. So if you imagine like you want to do a chat GPT, and but basically you just don't want all your information to be made available. You want it to be truly private. You want it to be accessible. Even if the company decides to shut down one day, I think that's where like decentralization plays a part, right? But that is a very philosophical sort of argument. I think when it comes down to like building a company within the space, you need to be like very real in terms of what are the actual advantages that crypto and blockchain actually brings to AI, that allows you to build things, build products, build tools that are better than what is out there. And that's where I focus a lot of my mind, space and attention on. I think one very interesting area is around like verification. And I think this is where there's a very big gap like within the Web2 AI space, where there is no natural way to be able to verify that a particular like, AI model ran in the way that you prompted it. For example, if you were to use like ChatGPT, you send a query to it. How do you know that that input that you actually provided to ChatGPT was not modified along the way? How do you know that it actually ran on the model that it was specified? Because once you type that query in, it's just a black box, right? You have no idea, and you just trust the answer that comes out from ChatGPT. And so far, it relies a lot on the reputation of these companies, and so far they seem to be fine. But at some point in time, especially when AI starts to be used in very, I would say, high stakes kind of like use cases, for example, in DeFi, which I know you spend a lot of time in, or for example, in like healthcare or in governance, right? Then this becomes a very big problem. We need to be able to verify the inputs and the outputs of these AI models. And there's no way to do this in the current Web2 system. with crypto and blockchains, there are different ways and methods we can do this. For example, a very big area of research is around like zero knowledge machine learning, where you use like zero knowledge proofs and these circuits in order to prove that a particular like outcome was actually a particular computation was actually done, and it all can be verified very easily. There are also various sort of like economic design models that rely on, it's a little bit like these like optimistic roll-ups on like Ethereum, where basically you have a system of people who are watching the transactions, watching the computations, and if any of these like computations appear to be fraudulent or off, then someone can sort of like create a sort of like argument and sort of like point to someone not being honest like on there, and then basically there are penalties like for not being honest on this. So I think these are some areas that are in the early works in terms of like bringing that verification function to AI. And I don't want to harp so much on this part yet, because there are a lot of other topics around this as well. But I truly believe like this is one area that AI just can't do today on its own without the blockchain. I think moving beyond that, another very powerful area where crypto plays a very big part is around token incentives. And with token incentives, you can do a lot of things. And the area where we've seen a lot of very interesting like companies in Web3 apply these incentives is really around data collection and data aggregation. So for example, like in the last couple of weeks, we spent a lot of time looking at Web3 companies that are working on robotics. And robotics is very interesting because I think it's very clear to everyone that this is going to be the next new trillion-dollar market in the next 5 to 10 years, right? Today, it's a very small market. There are probably like less than a few hundred humanoid robots in the entire US. But in 5 to 10 years, I think we're going to see like at least 1 million of these like robots out there. So the challenge with these robots right now is that there is not enough data for them to be able to train on, right? Because if you think about like these large language models that are out there today, they've been trained on like trillions of like data tokens, which is basically the entirety of the internet. These like robots, if we want them to be able to do tasks in a factory, or we want them to be at home, being able to like fold our clothes or wash the dishes, they need a lot of like data to train on. And today, the amount of data that's available is more in the region of like millions of encounters and data sets. So that's almost like 6 orders of magnitude less data that we have in robotics versus on these like large language models. So the idea around like crypto and incentives is basically, can we use like tokens? Can we use these incentive networks? Can we use some form of like gamification in order to get more and more people to contribute their data in terms of like gathering these very important data sets that is needed to get to the next level of these models. Some of these companies have their own like hardware, they have their own like motion capture suits, or they have their own like sidewalk robots that you can buy, you can operate these, and you get incentives for operating these and using these things and playing some form of game around that. So I think there's also one very interesting area where crypto plays a very big part. And then I think like on the flip side, like where AI adds a lot of value to crypto, and we've seen a lot of like companies also building in this, is really, I think the user interface of like interacting with the blockchain, interacting with crypto is very clunky. You still have to use your Phantom, MetaMask wallets. You have to click a lot of different buttons. Oftentimes you're signing a transaction and you don't, I still have that fear in me. Sometimes you don't really know what you're signing. So the idea is that if we really want to get to like crypto being the interface to many different things, many different applications, for many more people to interact with it, we need to make it as easy as possible for people to understand and for people to use. And so there are teams that are doing that, almost like a chat GPT or an AI assistant for interacting with the blockchain. So instead of having, let's say you send some tokens or send some money between wallets, you don't actually have to go to the exchange. You don't actually have to do the transaction yourself. Basically, you type it in natural language and you'll kind of like do it on your own. And I think that's a very interesting step. And hopefully that will kind of like get a lot more people on board into the space. I think the second part of this is that there is also a lot of very interesting data on the blockchain. The blockchain it's just full of data, but it's very messy, it's very unstructured. It's often very difficult to make sense of exactly what's happening within this. But with some of these AI models, we can actually start to understand what's actually happening, who are these transactions from, and actually what's actually going on, and gives us a better like view into what's happening inside like all these like different systems. Yeah, I can go on and on, but I think like there are just many different, I would say, like potential intersections between this. And I think to kind of like cap off this like quick riff is that I think we're also in the very early days of like crypto and AI. Like if you think about like, for example, what happened with stable coins, right? Stable coins have been around for quite a long time, many, many years, but it's only in the last year or so that it's really gotten the right amount of adoption, and the regulatory landscape has also supported a lot of these. I think the same thing is also happening with like many of these like crypto AI protocols. They're very infrastructure heavy. They're building some of these privacy preserving like computation, zero knowledge proofs. All of these are very important infrastructure, but they're still in the very early days of development adoption. So a lot of like where I measure things are not in the region of like weeks, but rather in the months and years in terms of like some of these things actually like being used. But I think there's a very big opportunity here, because the AI, what's happening in AI today is a very new industry, at least in terms of like these large language models, and it's evolving very fast. And what this means is that if we play our cards right, there is a chance that we can get some of our technology stacks being adopted as an integral part of the whole AI development stack. And I think that's a golden opportunity, and we have a very small window period to make sure that some of these things actually start being used by actual people and developers.
I agree on a lot of the points you brought forward here. I think it's if you look at the basic value proposition and function of a blockchain to just make data available and verifiable, and create an incentive system that makes it a negative EV to try to cheat it, in at least in most cases. I think that fits well with kind of unlocking this entire new ocean of data and using this data to train models. Decentralized training and more control over your data makes a lot of sense. I think there are two major challenges we are seeing right now, and that we've also seen with other potential application sectors of crypto in the past. I think the first one is very prominent in the entire decentralized physical infrastructure sector. That's a DePIN. So it has been pretty easy to bootstrap supply of any given service, or let's say it's with Helium, you've been able to incentivize the Helium hotspots being spun up all over a couple of nations. Where you look at Filecoin or Arweave or Akash, you've been able to bootstrap the supply side of, we are willing to provide decentralized storage for data to be stored on chain, or we are willing to provide decentralized compute to be tapped into. What we've always struggled with is also finding a matching demand side. And if you don't find that demand in time, you're using up a lot of your firepower, a lot of these tokens to incentivize the supply side. And when all these suppliers start dumping the tokens, and there's no buyer to step in because there's too little demand, and when you are sort of in a downward spiral. So I do hope that we are able to prevent repeating that very playbook in the field of AI. And then the second big challenge we are facing right now is, and I think the stablecoin industry is a great comparison and example for that, is that there is a lot of demand for that infrastructure, for these applications, from the traditional finance side, from the fintech side. But the value accrual, even though blockchain tech and crypto and DeFi sits at the core of creating these value proposition, the value accrual does not happen towards these protocols. I think Circle is a great example for that. I mean, USDC only got big, only got famous because there were applications in DeFi where you could use USDC for. And the crypto rails, Ethereum, Solana, other EVM networks, and other blockchains allowed people in second and third world nations to tap into US dollar liquidity without any barriers, without any KYC, without any permissions that are being needed. But the value accrual now happens on the public side of the markets, and not necessarily towards these blockchain networks. And I am concerned that we will see a similar dynamic on the AI side, because even though you're able to like spin up a lot of applications on crypto and use blockchain infrastructure to make the training more decentralized and more verifiable, have more ownership over the data being used to train AI models, or that data being used to feed like real-time decisions of AI models. But who would prevent all of the value just accruing back to OpenAI or any of the other Mac 7 or any of the other centralized AI companies? So I think these are two major challenges we are seeing there. Maybe on the field of, okay, we can use AI to improve crypto workflows, to automate certain allocations into DeFi yields, etc. What's the state of the union there? And especially, how is the security side of AI agents working in DeFi and working in crypto right now? Because when I talk to a lot of my friends who are active in DeFi, they are very concerned of giving any AI agent even any permission to transact within their wallet or allocate any part of their portfolio, because there have been a lot of concerns about these potentially getting exploited.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, and I think I'll just like throw in some comments on the 2 points that you said around the DP networks, because I think that's a very important, I guess, a challenge and question for many of these like crypto and Web3 sort of like startups as well. So I think the first part about like supply being easy and demand being difficult, I think that's very true, and I think that's where a lot of the founders and within the AI space, a lot of these DP networks are centered around like compute, right? Being able to aggregate like compute. So being able to aggregate like people providing their computers is not difficult if you give them an incentive to do so. I think the challenge where these startups are trying to solve, and I feel they will solve it in time, because the problem is very clear. It's not undefined. It's basically enterprise adoption, right? And in order to, enterprises are the one that will be paying the big money for startups. You can actually have like independent developers. You can have university researchers use these networks, and these are the main people using some of these decentralized compute networks right now. But they are not the ones that will be generating these like tens of millions of dollars in terms of revenue of this. So these startups need to work towards building an enterprise-ready product. And so there are a couple of things that need to get there. They need to get their certifications well. They need to make sure their security concerns are well addressed. They need to have the user interface, and they need to have these like service level agreements that make sure there's always a certain percent of like uptime before like enterprises will even consider using some of these networks. So I think step by step we'll probably get there, and hopefully once that's settled, the demand side for some of these things will start to come. I think on the second part around the value accrual of like towards like these tokens, yeah, that's always been a big question, and I think like today, like probably like most like tokens that we see out there today, we are probably like more like meme coins rather than that actual like sort of like equity or capital like assets that are there. I do see some like I guess like green shoots or like at least teams that are trying to shift that. Like for example, like one team which I do like a lot around this like token value accrual is a team called Grass. So Grass, basically what they do is they aggregate basically you can download an extension, you can on your home computer, and basically that what it does is it takes a small percentage of your internet bandwidth, and then it scrapes the internet, scrapes a website. So basically they have like maybe 3 to 5 million of these like nodes that are out there right now, and they're scraping a huge amount of information in real time from the internet. And this data is very valuable for AI companies who want to train the large language models, AI companies who want to provide like real-time data and context to the queries that they actually provide. And Grass being able to like scrape all of these in a very quick way using these very large number of nodes they have been able to do so is very cool, because like you can't do that in a centralized way because the cloud providers will block your IP addresses and so. So what Grass did, which I thought was very interesting, was basically they have this Grass Foundation. They transfer all the IP from their company to the Grass Foundation. They said that the token was the only thing that would matter right now, and so the equity is not the main thing, but the token is going to be the main value accrual mechanism. Right now is still uncertain in terms of like how that revenue, which apparently they've said they're generating like 8-figure annualized revenues, which is pretty impressive right now, serving some of supposedly some of these are very large AI labs that are out there. But eventually, I think like they'll find some way to do that either through some form of like buy and burn, token buybacks, or revenue sent back to these like token holders. But I like the intention here where you can see that they're starting to think about how to align value between the token holders as well as the actual like product and usage. So hopefully more protocols will follow some of their footsteps. And then I think like going back to the question around like security, and in these like DeFi AI agents, they are doing trading on your behalf. Yeah, I think there's a very tricky problem. I think some of the ways I've seen companies like tackle this is one, some of them don't use these large language models, and the reason is because like large language models, they do hallucinate. So at some point in time, they are non-deterministic, and there's always a risk that some of the outputs at one point in time will lead to some kind of losses. So they use more of like specialized models that they have trained on their own using their own sort of like data sets where the outcome they are is a lot more deterministic. So I think that's one thing. I think second is that it's going to be a very big mental barrier. I think the same with like many DeFi protocols, because like with DeFi, the biggest problem is probably the smart contract risk, right? You never know when a smart contract is going to be hacked. And we've seen like protocols like, function very well for 3-4 years. And then one day they just, have some kind of exploit that someone decides to run, and then they lose a very large amount of money. So for DeFi, it just kind of like takes time, right? It takes years of the protocol being live, being battle tested, and people having the opportunity to exploit it. And if it doesn't get exploited for a long period of time, people start to build that trust in it and start to use it a lot more. So I think the same thing is going to happen with some of these like agents. I think there are going to be many of these agents that eventually get exploited in some way, either through some form of like prompt injection, data poisoning, or some of these like adversarial kind of like techniques. But the ones that are good and well, and they continue to build and improve over time, we start to see that, hey, they're actually able to generate a good yield. They're actually able to perform well over a long period of time without any like adverse sort of like events. And then people start to flock to some of these. So I feel like a lot of it just takes a little bit of time to kind of like figure some of this out.
Are there any projects in the agentic space you still consider worth researching or worth looking at? Because we've seen a huge run-up of AI agents and virtuals as the largest AI agent launchpad in December 2024. I think it peaked at around 3 or 4 billion market capitalization. And the attention and the kind of output of these launchpads has declined drastically ever since we've entered this year. And most of the AI agents that were launched through virtuals are down 80, 90%, sometimes even more. Are there any insights, any applications, any products, any agents from that period that are still like sticking around and are doing well? Or would you say that this has been one of these early overshootings of valuation of a very emergent sector and is likely not coming back?
Yeah, no, I think that's a very great observation. And how I kind of think about this is that in the early part of this year, when AI agents were all the rage, everyone was trying to build an AI agent. There were many of these AI agent tokens that were launching like every single day. I think this was what I would call like the first generation of like tokenized AI agents. Many of these AI agents will focus on trading or focus on doing some form of research. And I think that was sort of like really captured just like people's like attention and mindshare, because it was something that was almost seemed magical, and we hadn't seen something like this before. So fast forward a couple of months later, now it becomes a lot clearer like what AI can do. There are a lot of these agents out there that can, we've seen what agents outside of the Web3 space can do, and they're pretty good out there as well. So I think what we're going to see is in some time, maybe in 3 months, in 6 months, a couple of weeks, I don't really know the exact time frame. We're going to see the next generation of like AI agents in Web3 sort of like emerge. And these AI agents are going to be a lot more, at least the ones that will be successful will be a lot more, firstly, product focused. They'll be doing and achieving some form of real outcomes. One example of a sector of like AI agents, which I think is very powerful, is around like marketing, right? You can create an AI agent that's able to help you find the most interesting topics and trends on social media, create very compelling posts, post them out there, get people to like, retweet, share using some form of incentives. I think that's a very interesting idea like to explore. I'm going to see some of these like productive use cases that kind of like come out of these things. I think another part within the sort of like the next generation of like AI agents that will come out of it will be the agent swarms. And in the previous generation, earlier of this part of this year, mostly these AI agents are operating in isolation. Basically, we had AI XBT, which would basically just consolidate, aggregate all the most important like tweets from KOLs, and then it would just tweet something that's interesting and funny. But mostly it's operating on its own. I think what we're going to see in the coming, I would say probably like months from a time frame, is how AI agents are actually able to coordinate with one another, even though they are built by different people and disparate. And that's actually where I see a very big component of the blockchain actually coming in, because the blockchain serves as a neutral coordination layer for many of these like AI agents that are out there. And it allows them to also talk with the same language on the blockchain versus like not having the blockchain. Then you have to interface with all these different APIs, and it becomes a very messy situation. And that's what's happening actually out there in Web 2. So we're starting to see, and like you mentioned, like Virtual is actually one of the teams that actually is trying to push this out. They recently released this like agent commerce protocol ACP, which basically it's, I would say it's more of like a proof of concept today. It's still raw. There's still a lot that needs to be done, but basically it gives every agent an identity. It gives every agent an on-chain reputation based on what it has done. And with these things, it allows agents to negotiate with one another on the blockchain in terms of like one being able to provide a service and the other agent needing a particular service that's out there. Right? So it's almost like a decentralized marketplace of like different AI agents with different skill sets and different pricing for their services that's out there. And then when you put it out there, I think the idea behind AI agent swarms is that at some point in time, we will see like emergent intelligence. And emergent intelligence is where, I guess the simple thing is like where 1 + 1 = 3, where the combined outputs of multiple different AI agents working together is way beyond the output of what like these agents could have done on their own, like individually, right? So this emergence intelligence phenomenon is we've seen this in like nature, in insect swarms, in ants, and all of that. But can this happen with AI agents? I think that's a bit of that bet that's out there. And we'll find out in the next like couple of months. So I think these are some of the things that I think are quite interesting. I think to me, for sure, AI agents are going to have some form of resurgence, because this is probably the most exciting like sector even within Web2 AI right now. Everyone is trying to build an AI agent. Everyone believes that every single application and software and tool that we use today is going to be replaced by an AI agent. Many of the jobs that we have out here today are also going to be replaced by an AI agent that's out there. So we're just all trying to figure out how do we actually get to that sort of like future vision.
I agree a lot with your thesis that we'll see a resurgence on the AI agent side, because even though we've had that brief run-up in December 2024, I do not think that we have seen the dot-com bubble moment for AI as a whole, just because there has been a total lack, a total absence of appropriate vehicles to bet on the rise of AI. I mean, as a regular retail person, you cannot directly invest into ChatGPT. You cannot directly invest into Grok. You can somehow proxy invest into Gemini by buying Alphabet stock, but that's about it. Maybe you can buy Meta stock if you are betting on Zuckerberg succeeding with the acquisition of very expensive OpenAI and other employees to bootstrap their AI projects. But yeah, I think we are in for some resurgence there. I do think it is going to look different to what we have seen in December last year, just because the modes that existed back then are all gone by now. I think it's one thing that I find really interesting about AI is that if you're building something on let's say on top of GPT, if there's a new version of GPT coming out and this whatever use case you were just building on gets internalized, OpenAI is basically able to wipe out a couple of dozen or 100 startups building an AI with the release of a new model, which I think is just very reflective, and it's kind of an honest insight into how volatile and exponentially evolving our world has become. And while it sucks for these projects, obviously, I do think overall it's like we can be proud as a species to have come to a point where we are able to evolve so quickly that these modes are basically non-existent. And on the other hand, where it goes deeper into these incentive alignments, into kind of preserving privacy, etc., where you can use blockchain to actually build a productive mode, because you cannot out innovate, out compete networks and human ingenuity and like the unique data produced by humans at the end of the day. So yeah, I'm pretty excited what is about to come on that side of things. Maybe to dive into your newsletter a bit, you're writing Chain of Thought. So how did the idea of the newsletter emerge? What is your research process, and what are you mainly covering in the different issues?
Yeah. So honestly, when we first started the newsletter, it was really around like for me, I find that writing has always been a way that allows me to like synthesize information in a much better way. And when I first started writing, um, the newsletter, and one of the first articles that I wrote was a piece on BitTensor, and interestingly, it was not a very bullish piece. In fact, like a lot of it was I was pointing out a lot of some of the flaws in terms of the economic design, like of BitTensor in the early part of like last year, almost 2 years ago. And then yeah, after I realized that hey, there's something interesting that's happening like within the space, like I started to figure out like how do I stay in touch with what's going on, because there's something there. It's a little bit niche at the point in time. And when we started a newsletter last year, like the AI agent meta hadn't started yet, right? This was before like Truth Terminal and Goat kicked off the whole like frenzy around like AI agents. So it's really a way for me to just like learn more as much as possible about this niche by spending time with the teams and projects that are building like within this sort of like vertical. And then it's kind of like evolve quite a bit. So today, what we do is that we have a weekly newsletter that rounds up all the important updates. We track more than 200 different startups and protocols that are building across like different sectors, from decentralized training, compute marketplaces, robotics, AI agents. Yeah, so we track quite a number of like different sectors out there, and we want to surface like all the most important developments to people, because it's very chaotic. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to keep up, and I personally myself, like sometimes I often struggle with this. On the other hand, what we also realize is that many of these like teams and startups that are building like in the Web3 or crypto AI space, they are also like private companies. Relatively early stage startups. Some of them have raised maybe 1 or 2 rounds of funding to keep them going so far. But there isn't a lot of information that's available publicly. Right? If you were to go to their website or go to their Twitter account, you can just have a very surface level understand and see what they're trying to build. But it's often quite difficult to understand what's actually happening. And one of the biggest frustrations I get is that when I try to learn a little bit more about a crypto AI protocol, I go to the website, I click the website, and then I get thrown a whole bunch of jargon, which you know, after reading the website for 5 minutes, I still don't understand what they're actually trying to do out there. So that's what we kind of like set up to solve as well. I know it's a huge problem. So that's what we try to set out to solve. So what we do is we also do deep dives. And with these deep dives, we spend time with the team themselves. We try to pull out the information from the minds of these like very interesting and smart and visionary founders, and then present that in our sort of like research reports that are out there. So hopefully people can also understand what's happening with these teams. I think one more thing that I kind of mentioned is that we've also been exploring beyond the crypto AI space. So while so far up to a month ago, a lot of our research has been focused on like crypto and AI and this intersection, we actually recently launched a new newsletter that is focused entirely on AI agents that doesn't involve crypto or blockchain in any way. And part of our thinking around this is that we realize that the people who are interested like in decentralized AI is still a very small niche group and bubble of people who share the same ideals that's out there. And I've always been thinking about how can we grow this pie? How can we get more people interested in what we're actually building here? in decentralized AI, right? which I feel that there's a lot of advantages and importance for this to exist in this world. So that's what we're doing. We're venturing out. We're playing in a bigger pond. We hopefully get more people interested in what we're doing, and then we bring them slowly into this world of like decentralized AI through some of our research and content out there. So that's what we've been spending a lot of our time on, and hopefully in the next like couple of months we have a lot more to share of this.
Very nice. I'll definitely link your newsletter in the podcast description, because for me, as somebody who has zero technical knowledge nor technical background, it has helped me a lot to understand the whole crypto XAI and AI agents implications and the mechanisms behind it. Maybe to finish off, are there any projects being built in the crypto XAI space, DeFi AI or AI agents, that are worth looking at and where people can maybe get some upside from, maybe from just using them and integrating into their daily workflows, maybe by buying the token or just like playing around with them or better understanding the space?
Yeah. I think one crypto AI like protocol and startup, which I think is quite interesting. They don't have a token yet, but they're probably going to be launching a token sometime, sometime this year. Is a protocol called Recall Network. So to me, they are almost something like a Google for AI agents, because if you look at AI agents today, there are so many of these like agents that are, they do trading, they do research, they do all these different things, but oftentimes it's very hard to tell, is this agent actually good? Is it actually able to like generate a good yield for me? Is it actually able to do the right kind of like research on the blockchain for me? We don't have any of these like benchmarks or metrics that are out there today. So what Recall does is that they are creating something called agent rank. And so this is an algorithm that basically ranks these AI agents in terms of their capabilities. So if I want to like do something, I can just figure out like which of these agents are the ones that actually have the best performance and that I should be using these AI agents. And they do this through a series of like they're starting with these series of like on-chain competitions. So they have a couple of like different like trading competitions where actually anyone, you can actually create an AI agent, and you can participate in some of these like trading competitions. And if your AI agent actually does well within the competition period, is able to show that it was able to generate the best yield, and all of this is recorded transparently on the blockchain, then you can actually earn some of these like rewards, right? And if you're not an AI agent builder, what you can do is that you can also stake some of your, you can also stake on these AI agents in the future when the token is live. You can actually stake your tokens on these, on the AI agents that you think are going to perform the best. So there's a little bit of that social component as well that goes into this. But ultimately, I think the idea of being able to have almost like a directory and ranking of these AI agents in the same way that Google was able to rank the relevance of the different websites on the internet, that makes it a lot more useful, a lot more relevant to people who are on the internet when we do our Google searches. I think Recall is trying to do the same thing as well. So I think that's one that I would probably watch for. I think another one that I saw recently also have a very interesting launch is a team that's called FrodoBots. So FrodoBots, they have these like very cute like sidewalk robots that would basically cost about $100, and then basically they would be, you can control them, they explore the cities, they're roaming around, they have a camera and some sensors on it, and see they're capturing a lot of like street data as they're exploring these different cities throughout the world. So anyone can buy one of these robots, and then you basically put it around the city, and then you just control it remotely through your computer or through your phone, and then you can collect this data, and you can sort of like they have some kind of like game right now that's ongoing where you can actually like it's almost like a bit like a Pokemon Go kind of game, this augmented reality thing where you can go around different places, fight different monsters, collect different sort of like creatures within it, but at the same time you're also helping to train hopefully a very smart humanoid robot in the future. So they have some of these things that's going. They're going to be launching also a network that's called BitRobot, which wants to be the BitTensor for robotics, where basically every subnet on BitRobot is going to be focused on a different challenge and problem within robotics. So I think it's very interesting. I feel like there's a very big need around some of these challenges that the team is working towards. So I would say like these are two that have caught my eye in the last 1-2 weeks.
Very nice. We'll also link these to check out in the podcast description. To finish off, and it was absolutely amazing having you on. I think you're one of the best voices to follow if you're interested in the CryptoX AI space, Teng. Where can people find you? Where can people find your newsletter? Where can people learn more?
Oh, thank you so much. That's very kind of you, and it really means a lot to me because sometimes when you're a researcher, you don't really know who's kind of like reading the things that you write about. You just put it out there in the internet and hope people kind of like look for it. But yeah, I'm pretty active on Twitter, so I share a lot of like unfiltered like thoughts and learnings on my Twitter account at 0x Prismatic. So that's where I'm often available. Feel free to DM me if you want. Our main research portal is at chainofthought.xyz. So that's where we publish all of our deep dives as well as a weekly newsletter that's there. And then our new AI agents of our newsletter is at agents.chainofthought.xyz. So yeah, if you just subscribe to these, you'll get all the latest information and it's absolutely free of charge.
Very nice. We'll make sure to link all the links in the podcast description. It was great having you on, and have a great day.
Yeah, great chatting with you, Max, and yeah, everyone. Hope you have a great week too.